The jewelry box sat open on my dresser like an accusation, empty velvet where Margaret's engagement ring should have been resting, the ring I'd saved for my daughter Emma when she turned 21. I stood there holding my breath, hoping my eyes were playing tricks on me. The ring had been there last month when I'd checked on it, a 2-carat diamond set in white gold that had belonged to my mother, then to Margaret. Now there was nothing but an indentation in the purple fabric. "Linda, do you know what happened to Margaret's ring, the one from the jewelry box?" I called down the hallway to my wife of 3 years. She was in the kitchen making her famous Tuesday casserole. Silence stretched longer than it should have. Finally, Linda's voice came back, carefully modulated. "Which ring are you talking about, David?" Which ring? As if I kept dozens of dead wives' jewelry lying around. "The diamond engagement ring, my mother's ring, the one I showed you when we got married," I replied. More silence. The sound of a casserole dish being placed in the oven with unnecessary force. I walked to the kitchen. Linda was wiping her hands on a dish towel with mechanical precision. Her face had that look she got when she was choosing her words carefully. "Oh, that ring," Linda said, not meeting my eyes. "I had to take care of something urgent with it. Take care of something urgent. With a ring that had been sitting safely in my dresser for 20 years. What kind of urgent matter requires Margaret's engagement ring?" I asked. Linda folded the towel into perfect thirds, a nervous habit I'd learned to recognize. Jake needed a car for his new job. "You know how important this opportunity is for him," she explained. Jake was Linda's 22-year-old son from her first marriage, a kid who'd been finding himself for the past 4 years while living in my basement. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Linda, please tell me you didn't sell Margaret's ring to buy Jake a car," I said. Linda looked at me then, her chin raised in that defensive way that meant she knew she'd crossed a line but wasn't ready to admit it. "It was just sitting there, David, not doing anyone any good." "Jake needed transportation to make something of his life," she replied. Just sitting there, not doing anyone any good, a family heirloom that had survived the Depression, World War II, and 43 years of marriage to Margaret. "That ring was for Emma," I said quietly. "I've told you a dozen times it's her inheritance from her grandmother and her mother." Linda's expression shifted to that patient look she used when she thought I was being unreasonable. "David, Emma is 35 years old. She's been married for 10 years. She doesn't need another engagement ring," Linda replied. The logic was so twisted it took me a moment to untangle it. "It's not about need, Linda. It's about family history, about honoring Margaret's memory," I explained. "Margaret has been gone for 5 years, Linda said, her voice taking on an edge. "At some point, we need to focus on the living family." The living family, meaning her and Jake, not Emma, who'd been part of my life for 35 years. I walked to the kitchen window and looked out at the garden Margaret had planted. The roses she'd babied through harsh winters were blooming again. "How much did you get for it?" I asked. "Enough to buy Jake a reliable used car. He starts his job at the insurance company next week," Linda answered. She said it like she'd solved a complex mathematical equation instead of stealing a piece of my family's history. "Linda, that ring was worth at least $15,000. Probably more," I told her. Linda's face went pale. "15,000? The jewelry store only gave me 4,000, she said. Of course they had. Pawn shops and quick cash jewelry stores prey on people who don't understand what they're selling. Linda had traded a ring worth more than most people's cars for enough money to buy Jake a decent used Honda. I sat down at the kitchen table where Margaret and I had eaten breakfast together for 23 years, where Emma had done her homework while Margaret packed her school lunches, where Linda now served meals to a family that apparently didn't include my daughter. "I need you to understand something," I said to Linda, looking directly at her. "That ring wasn't mine to give away. It belonged to Emma." Linda's jaw tightened. "Emma didn't even know it existed," she replied. "She knew. I told her about it on her 18th birthday. I told her it would be hers when the time was right," I explained. The color drained from Linda's face completely. "You never mentioned that to me," Linda said. "I mentioned it when I showed you the ring 3 years ago. You said it was beautiful and you understood how important family heirlooms are," I reminded her. Linda sat down across from me, her hands fidgeting with her wedding band. "David, I'm sorry. I thought it was just something you were keeping for sentimental reasons," she said. "My mother wore that ring for 62 years. Margaret wore it for 43 years. It was supposed to represent 4 generations of love in our family," I told her. I can try to get it back, Linda said quickly. I can call the jewelry store tomorrow. But we both knew that ring was gone, probably already broken down for parts or sold to someone who'd never know its history. What's the name of the store? I asked. Linda's hesitation told me everything I needed to know. Cash for Gold on Hamilton Street, she admitted. A strip mall pawn shop that specialized in desperate people selling family treasures for quick money. I'd driven past it hundreds of times, always wondering who would sell their grandmother's china or their father's watch to a place like that. Now I knew. People like Linda who saw dollar signs instead of decades of love. That evening, I called Emma. She lived 2 hours away with her husband Mark and their twin boys. "Hi, Dad, how are you doing?" Emma asked. Her voice always carried warmth, even when she was tired from work or dealing with her energetic 8-year-olds. "I'm fine, sweetheart. How are the boys?" I replied. We talked for a few minutes about school and soccer practice and the tree fort Mark was building in their backyard. Then I took a breath and said what I'd been rehearsing for an hour. "Emma, I need to tell you something about your grandmother's ring," I said. Silence on the other end of the line. "The engagement ring? The one you showed me in the jewelry box?" Emma asked. "Linda sold it to buy Jake a car," I said. The silence stretched longer this time. When Emma spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. "She sold Grandma's ring? Without asking you?" Emma asked. "Without asking either of us," I confirmed. I heard Emma take a shaky breath. "Dad, that ring meant everything to me. You know that, right?" she said. I closed my eyes. "I know, sweetheart. I'm so sorry," I replied. "It's not your fault. You didn't sell it," Emma said. "But it was my fault. I brought Linda into our home, into our family, without understanding what she was capable of." "What are you going to do?" Emma asked. I looked around the living room where Margaret's photographs still occupied the mantel, where her books still filled the shelves, where Linda had apparently felt comfortable selling pieces of Margaret's legacy to finance her son's career. "I don't know yet," I told Emma, "but I'll figure something out." After I hung up, Linda appeared in the doorway. She'd been listening. "David, I feel terrible about this. I really thought you wouldn't mind," Linda said. "Linda, how could I not mind? That ring was the most valuable thing Margaret left behind. Not in money, but in meaning," I replied. Linda sat down on the couch beside me, her face etched with what looked like genuine remorse. "I know I made a mistake. A big mistake. But David, Jake is finally getting his life together. This job could change everything for him," she said. Jake, who'd been getting his life together since he was 18, who'd dropped out of college twice, quit 4 jobs, and spent most of his 20s playing video games in my basement. "Linda, Jake is 22 years old. If he can't figure out how to get a car for his new job, maybe he's not ready for the responsibility of working," I said. Linda's face hardened. "That's a cruel thing to say about my son," she replied. "It's an honest thing to say about a young man who's never had to solve his own problems," I responded. Linda stood up, her posture rigid with defensive anger. "Jake is a good kid who's had some bad breaks. Unlike Emma, who's had everything handed to her," Linda said. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had been smoldering for 3 years. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked. Emma grew up with 2 parents who loved her, a stable home, college paid for, a wedding paid for. She's never had to struggle for anything," Linda explained. I felt something shift inside my chest. Not quite anger yet, but something approaching it. "Linda, Emma lost her mother when she was 30. She watched Margaret die of cancer for 2 years. Don't talk to me about her life being easy," I said. Linda's expression softened slightly, but her jaw remained set. "I'm not saying Emma's had no problems. I'm saying Jake has had different challenges. And sometimes, as parents, we have to make difficult decisions to help our children succeed," she replied. Parents. She'd said parents, as if Jake was my responsibility too, as if selling Margaret's ring to fund his latest fresh start was a decision we'd made together. I went to bed that night thinking about the jewelry box sitting empty on my dresser, about Emma's face when I'd shown her the ring on her 18th birthday, about the promise I'd made to Margaret during her final illness that I'd make sure Emma received her mother's most precious possessions. The next morning, I drove to Cash for Gold on Hamilton Street. The store was exactly what I'd expected. Fluorescent lights, bulletproof glass, and display cases full of wedding rings and watches that had once meant everything to someone. The clerk was a thin man in his 50s with the tired expression of someone who'd heard every sob story about desperate people selling family heirlooms. "I'm looking for a ring that was sold here yesterday," I said to him. "A 2-carat diamond in white gold setting." The clerk looked at me with practiced indifference. "We get a lot of rings, buddy. You got a receipt?" he asked. I didn't have a receipt. I had a wife who'd sold my family's history without my knowledge. My wife sold it, blonde woman about 50. Would have been nervous, maybe emotional, I explained. The clerk shrugged. That describes half our customers. Like I said, you got a receipt, I can maybe help you. No receipt, no sale, he replied. That ring belonged to my mother, my first wife. It was supposed to go to my daughter, I told him. The clerk's expression didn't change. Look, I'm sorry about your family situation, but I can't help you without documentation, he said. I drove home knowing the ring was gone forever. But sitting in my driveway, looking at the house Margaret and I had chosen together, I realized something important. The ring was gone, but the principles it represented weren't. Family loyalty, respect for the past, the understanding that some things matter more than money. Linda had violated all of those principles to help her son buy a car. But she was about to learn that actions have consequences, even when you're family, especially when you're family. 3 days passed before I could bring myself to look at the empty jewelry box again. Each time I opened my dresser drawer, that velvet indentation seemed to mock me, a perfect outline of what Linda had stolen from my family. But on Thursday morning, something changed. I wasn't just grieving the loss anymore, I was getting angry, and anger, I'd learned during my 43 years with Margaret, was a much more useful emotion than sadness. I called my insurance company first. The ring had been covered under our homeowner's policy for $12,000. Mr. Henderson, the claims adjuster said after I explained the situation, you'll need to file a police report for theft before we can process any claim. Theft. The word felt sharp in my mouth. It wasn't technically theft, I said to the adjuster. My wife sold it. Sir, if your wife sold property that belonged to you without your permission, that's conversion. Possibly theft by conversion, depending on her intent and your state laws, the adjuster explained. I thanked him and hung up, staring at the phone for a long moment. Linda hadn't just made a mistake. She'd committed a crime. That afternoon, I drove to the county courthouse and requested records of any liens or judgments against Linda Walsh Henderson. What I found made my stomach turn. Linda had accumulated over $30,000 in credit card debt that I knew nothing about. Department store cards, gas station credit, 3 different Visa accounts. All opened in the past 18 months. All delinquent. The most recent notices showed minimum payments that exceeded her part-time income at the dental office where she worked 2 days a week. I sat in my car outside the courthouse, pieces of a puzzle clicking together in my mind. The sudden interest in Jake's career prospects, the emphasis on him needing a reliable car instead of the perfectly functional 10-year-old Toyota he'd been driving. Linda hadn't sold the ring to help Jake. She'd sold it to keep herself from drowning in debt she'd hidden from me for over a year. Dramatic. My second wife had been living a financial double life while sleeping in the bed I'd shared with Margaret for 2 decades. When I got home, Linda was in the kitchen preparing dinner. She looked up with a nervous smile that didn't reach her eyes. "How was your day?" Linda asked, the same question she'd asked every day for 3 years. But today felt different. Today I was looking at a woman who'd been lying to me about fundamental aspects of her life. "Interesting," I said. "I learned some things I didn't know before." Linda's hands paused while chopping vegetables. "What kinds of things?" she asked. I sat down at the kitchen table and pulled out the courthouse documents. "I learned that you have $32,000 in credit card debt that you never mentioned when we combined our finances," I said. The color drained from Linda's face. The knife in her hand trembled slightly. "David, I can explain that," Linda said. "I'm sure you can. Just like you explained selling Margaret's ring," I replied. Linda set the knife down and turned to face me fully. Her expression cycled through surprise, fear, and finally, defiance. "Those debts were from before we got married, from when I was struggling as a single mother," she explained. I consulted the papers. The most recent charges are from last month. A $1,000 shopping spree at Nordstrom. $800 at that jewelry store downtown, I said. Linda's jaw tightened. "I needed clothes for work, and I bought myself a necklace for our anniversary," she replied. "Our anniversary is next month, Linda, and you bought yourself a $800 necklace while selling my family's heirloom for $4,000, I pointed out. The mathematics of her selfishness was staggering. She'd spent more on personal jewelry than she'd gotten for Margaret's ring. "It's not what you think," Linda said, but her voice lacked conviction. What I think is that you've been spending money we don't have while hiding debt that could destroy our financial security, I said. I spread the credit card statements across the kitchen table. What I think is that you sold Margaret's ring to make minimum payments on credit cards, not to buy Jake a car. Linda's facade finally cracked. She slumped against the kitchen counter, her face crumpling. I never meant for it to get this bad. After my divorce, I had to use credit cards for everything. Groceries, utilities, Jake's school clothes, Linda explained. That was 5 years ago, Linda. These statements show ongoing spending throughout our entire marriage, I said. Linda wiped her eyes with a dish towel. I kept thinking I could pay them off before you found out. I kept thinking my hours at the dental office would increase, she said. So you sold my dead wife's ring to buy yourself time, I concluded. Linda flinched at my tone. I sold it to keep us from losing our credit rating, to protect our home, she said. Our home. The house Margaret and I had paid off together before her illness consumed our savings. Linda, this house was paid for when we got married. Your debt can't touch it, I told her. Linda's expression shifted again, this time to something approaching panic. But if I declare bankruptcy, it would affect your credit too, she said. Not if we divorce, I replied. The words came out before I'd consciously decided to say them. But once they were spoken, they felt inevitable. Linda stared at me as if I'd slapped her. David, you can't be serious, she said. You've been lying to me for 3 years about your financial situation. You sold my family's most precious heirloom to cover debts you accumulated while living in my house, I said. Dramatic. You've treated my daughter like an obstacle and my late wife's memory like an inconvenience. Linda's eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were genuine or strategic. I love you, David. I made mistakes, but I love our life together, Linda said. Our life together is built on lies, I replied. I gathered the credit card statements and stood up. I'm going to stay at Emma's for a few days while I figure out what to do next, I said. David, please don't leave. We can work this out, Linda pleaded. But as I packed a suitcase, I realized I didn't want to work it out. The betrayal felt too complete, too calculated. Linda hadn't made one mistake in a moment of desperation. She'd made dozens of deliberate choices over 3 years. That evening, I sat in Emma's guest room, surrounded by photographs of her children and the life she'd built with Mark. Emma knocked on the door around 9 o'clock. Dad, can I come in? She asked. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, her expression mixing concern with barely contained anger. I've been thinking about the ring all week, Emma said, about what it represented. What did it represent to you? I asked. Continuity, the idea that love could survive death, that Mom's love for me would be something tangible I could pass on to my own children someday, Emma explained. Her voice broke slightly. It was the one thing of Mom's that was specifically meant for me, not just something I could inherit, but something that was always intended to be mine. I reached over and took her hand. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I should have kept it in a safety deposit box, I said. Dad, you shouldn't have had to protect Mom's ring from your wife, Emma replied. Emma was right. Marriage should create trust, not require defensive measures to protect family heirlooms. What are you going to do? Emma asked. I don't know yet, but I'm not going back to living with someone who sees your mother's memory as an obstacle to her son's success, I said. Emma nodded. Good, because Jake posted photos of his new car on social media yesterday, she said. Emma showed me her phone. Jake standing beside a red Camaro with racing stripes and custom wheels. The kind of car that cost significantly more than $4,000. Where did he get the money for the rest of it? I asked. That's what I was wondering, Emma replied. I stared at the photos, a new suspicion forming. Emma, what if the ring wasn't the first thing Linda sold? I asked. We looked at each other across the guest room, both thinking the same thing. What else had disappeared from my house without my knowledge? The next morning, I called my insurance agent and requested a complete inventory review of all items covered under our homeowner's policy. Mr. Henderson, when did you last update your coverage? The agent asked. About 2 years ago, after Linda moved in, I replied. I'll pull your file and cross-reference it with current assets. If there are discrepancies, we'll need to investigate, the agent said. While I waited for the insurance review, I drove back to the house when I knew Linda would be at work. I went through every room systematically, checking for items that should have been there, but weren't. Margaret's jewelry box had contained more than just the engagement ring. There had been pearl earrings, a gold bracelet, a vintage brooch shaped like a butterfly, all gone. The antique clock that had belonged to my grandfather was missing from the mantel. 2 of Margaret's oil paintings were no longer hanging in the hallway. Linda hadn't just sold 1 ring to help her son. She'd been systematically liquidating my family's possessions to fund her hidden lifestyle. I sat on Margaret's garden bench, surrounded by the roses she'd loved, and tried to calculate how much of my life had been stolen. Not just the monetary value, though that was substantial, but the memories attached to each piece. When Linda came home that evening, I was waiting in the kitchen with a notebook containing my inventory. "We need to talk," I said to Linda. Linda saw the notebook and her face went pale. "David, what is this?" she asked. "This is a list of everything you've stolen from me over the past 3 years," I said. "The pearl earrings that were Margaret's, the antique clock, the paintings, the silver tea service." With each item I named, Linda seemed to shrink further into herself. "You've been treating my home like your personal pawn shop," I continued. "Using my late wife's possessions to finance your spending addiction." "I was going to replace everything," Linda whispered. "With what money? You're $32,000 in debt," I said. Linda began crying, but the tears felt manipulative rather than genuine. "David, I never meant for this to happen. I just needed a little help getting back on my feet," Linda said. "Linda, you've been on your feet for 3 years. Living in my house, sleeping in my bed, eating food I paid for," I replied. "You've been taking my family's history and converting it to cash so you could maintain a lifestyle you couldn't afford." I closed the notebook and stood up. "I want you out of my house by the end of the week," I said. "David, please, where am I supposed to go?" Linda asked. "That's not my problem anymore. You should have thought about that before you turned my home into your personal ATM," I replied. Linda reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "David, I love you. We can work through this," she said. "No, we can't, because I'll never trust you again," I said. I walked toward the hallway, then paused at the doorway. "And Linda? I'm filing a police report tomorrow. What you did is called theft by conversion," I told her. Her sobs followed me up the stairs, but they sounded different now, less like grief and more like panic about the consequences she hadn't considered. But she was about to learn that actions have consequences. Even when you're family, especially when you're family. The police report took 2 hours to file. Detective Sarah Martinez listened to my story with the patient expression of someone who'd heard variations of it dozens of times before. "Mr. Henderson, theft by conversion in a marriage is complicated," Detective Martinez explained while typing notes into her computer. "We'll need to prove your wife knew the items belonged specifically to you or your daughter, not to the marital estate." I pulled out the insurance documents and the photographs Emma had taken of Margaret's jewelry years earlier. These items were specifically excluded from our prenuptial agreement. "Linda signed papers acknowledging they would remain separate property," I said. Detective Martinez's expression sharpened with interest. "You have a prenuptial agreement that lists these specific items?" she asked. "My attorney insisted on it after Margaret died. He said remarriage required protecting family heirlooms from exactly this kind of situation," I explained. James Crawford had been more prescient than I'd realized at the time. The detective made copies of everything and promised to contact Cash for Gold within 24 hours. "Mr. Henderson, even if we can't recover the items, we can build a case that might prevent your wife from hiding assets if you proceed with divorce," Detective Martinez said. I left the police station feeling something I hadn't experienced since discovering the empty jewelry box, a sense of forward momentum. Linda's actions were no longer just personal betrayals. They were documented crimes that would have legal consequences. But legal consequences weren't enough. Linda had spent 3 years systematically stealing my family's history while pretending to love me. She'd manipulated my grief and my desire for companionship to gain access to assets she could liquidate when her own financial irresponsibility caught up with her. She deserved more than a slap on the wrist from the criminal justice system. She deserved to understand exactly what it felt like to lose something irreplaceable. That evening, I called my attorney, James Crawford, and explained the situation. James had handled Margaret's estate and our prenuptial agreement. He knew the legal landscape better than anyone. "David, with the prenup and the police report, we can seek full recovery of the stolen items' value in divorce proceedings," James said. "But I'm more concerned about what else she might be planning." "What do you mean?" I asked. "A woman who's desperate enough to steal family heirlooms is desperate enough to escalate. Has she shown any signs of trying to access your bank accounts or other assets?" James asked. The question sent a chill through me. I'd been so focused on what Linda had already stolen that I hadn't considered what she might still be planning to take. The next morning, I drove to my bank and requested account statements for the past 6 months. What I found made me understand that Linda's theft had been even more systematic than I'd realized. Small withdrawals from our joint checking account, always just under the amount that would trigger automatic notifications. 200 here, 300 there, adding up to over $4,000 in unauthorized withdrawals. Mr. Henderson, the branch manager explained, since these withdrawals were made using your wife's authorized access to the joint account, they're technically legal, but the pattern suggests deliberate concealment. I closed the joint account immediately and opened a new individual account at a different bank. If Linda wanted to steal more money, she'd have to work harder for it. But as I sat in my car outside the bank, I realized that defensive measures weren't enough. Linda had spent 3 years taking advantage of my trust and my desire to build a blended family. She'd treated my home like her personal asset recovery center. She needed to experience the same sense of violation and loss that she'd inflicted on Emma and me. That afternoon, I called Emma and explained my plan. "Sweetheart, I want to make sure Linda understands exactly what she's cost our family, but I need your help to do it right," I said to Emma. Emma listened quietly as I outlined my idea. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. "Dad, are you sure you want to do this? It's going to hurt her badly," Emma said. "Emma, she sold your grandmother's ring to buy her son a sports car while hiding $32,000 in credit card debt from me. She's been stealing from us for 3 years," I replied. "I know, and I'm angry too. But once you do this, there's no going back. Your marriage will be over completely," Emma warned. Emma's concern touched me, but it also strengthened my resolve. The marriage was over the moment she decided my family's history was worth less than her son's convenience, I said. Emma sighed. "Okay, Dad, if this is what you need to do, I'll help you, but promise me you won't do anything that could get you in legal trouble," she said. "Everything I'm planning is completely legal, but Linda is going to learn that actions have consequences, even when you think you're dealing with someone who's too nice to fight back," I replied. The plan required careful timing and attention to detail. Linda's weakness was her desperation to maintain appearances, both financial and social. She'd spent years creating an image of herself as a devoted wife who'd helped me heal from Margaret's death. That image was about to be exposed as a carefully constructed lie, designed to give her access to assets she could steal when her own financial recklessness caught up with her. First, I needed to document everything Linda had stolen and sold. Emma helped me create a comprehensive inventory with photographs and estimated values. The total came to over $28,000 in family heirlooms and personal property. "Dad, this is worse than we thought," Emma said as we reviewed the list. "She's been stealing from you systematically since the day she moved in." Next, I researched Linda's employment history and discovered that her part-time job at the dental office was actually unemployment compensation for a position she'd lost 6 months earlier. She'd been lying about working while collecting benefits and using credit cards to maintain her lifestyle. "She's committed unemployment fraud on top of everything else," I told James Crawford during our strategy meeting. "The state labor department will be very interested in this information." James reviewed my documentation with professional appreciation. "David, you built a comprehensive case that shows pattern and intent. But what exactly are you planning to do with all this evidence?" James asked. I explained my plan. James listened with growing concern and admiration in equal measure. "It's legal, but it's also devastating." "Are you sure you want to destroy her this completely?" he asked. "James, she tried to steal my entire family legacy while pretending to love me. She's earned whatever destruction comes her way," I replied. The final piece of my plan required cooperation from Linda herself, which meant manipulating her the same way she'd manipulated me. I needed her to believe she still had a chance to salvage our marriage. When I returned home that evening, Linda was waiting in the kitchen with dinner prepared and candles lit. She'd dressed in the blue dress she'd worn on our wedding day, and her makeup couldn't quite hide the evidence that she'd been crying. "David, I've been thinking about everything you said, about the mistakes I've made and the trust I've broken," Linda said. She spoke carefully, as if she'd rehearsed these words. "I want to make things right between us." I sat down at the table and let her serve me dinner as if nothing had changed. "What do you mean by making things right?" I asked. "I've contacted a credit counseling service. I'm ready to address my debt problems honestly and create a plan for paying everything back, Linda said. She reached across the table and tried to take my hand. I know I can't undo what I've done, but I can prove that our marriage means more to me than money. The performance was impressive. If I hadn't seen her credit card statements and discovered the full extent of her theft, I might have been moved by her apparent remorse. What about the items you sold, Margaret's ring and the other family heirlooms? I asked. Linda's face crumpled with what looked like genuine regret. I'll do whatever it takes to get them back or replace them. Even if it takes years, I'll make it right, Linda said. I nodded as if I was considering her proposal. Linda, if we're going to rebuild our marriage, it has to be based on complete honesty. No more secrets about money or anything else, I said. Absolutely. Complete transparency from now on, Linda agreed. Good, because I think we should renew our wedding vows. Show everyone that our love is strong enough to survive this challenge, I suggested. Linda's face lit up with hope and relief. David, that's a wonderful idea. When were you thinking? Linda asked. Next month on our anniversary. We could have a small ceremony with just family and close friends, I said. I watched Linda's expression carefully. It would be a fresh start for both of us. Linda agreed enthusiastically, probably thinking she'd successfully manipulated me into forgiveness. She had no idea that our anniversary dinner would be the setting for her complete humiliation and the revelation of exactly how much her theft had cost her. The next 3 weeks were spent in careful preparation. Linda threw herself into planning our vow renewal, apparently believing she'd convinced me that her remorse was genuine. She bought a new dress, arranged flowers, and sent invitations to family members who had no idea what was really going to happen. Emma played her role perfectly, acting as if she'd forgiven Linda and was excited about the ceremony. I'm so glad you and Dad are working things out, Emma told Linda during a phone call I overheard. Family is the most important thing. Linda beamed at this apparent acceptance from the daughter she'd been viewing as competition. She had no idea that Emma was helping me document additional evidence of her theft and fraud. Meanwhile, I was making final arrangements for Linda's education. She was about to learn that some people are too nice to fight back, and others are smart enough to let their enemies defeat themselves. The anniversary dinner was scheduled for Saturday night at Chez Laurent, the same restaurant where I'd proposed to Margaret 44 years earlier. Linda thought we were celebrating our renewed commitment to each other. Actually, we were celebrating the end of her ability to steal from my family ever again. Chez Laurent looked exactly as it had 44 years ago when I'd nervously asked Margaret to marry me. The same burgundy tablecloths, the same soft piano music, the same romantic lighting that had witnessed decades of proposals, anniversaries, and celebrations. Linda had chosen our original table by the window, probably thinking the symbolism would help convince me that our marriage deserved the same reverence as my marriage to Margaret. She wore the blue dress from our wedding day and had spent the afternoon at a salon getting her hair styled. You look beautiful, I told Linda as the maitre d' seated us, and I meant it. Linda had always been an attractive woman, which had made her deception even more effective. Linda beamed at the compliment and reached across the table to squeeze my hand. David, I can't tell you how happy I am that we're here together. When I think about how close I came to losing you, Linda said, her voice catching with apparent emotion. The waiter appeared with champagne that Linda had pre-ordered, Dom Perignon, the same brand we'd shared on our wedding night. She'd thought of everything. To second chances, Linda said, raising her glass with tears in her eyes. To forgiveness and fresh starts and the love that's strong enough to survive anything. I clinked my glass against hers and took a sip of champagne that cost more than Margaret's ring had netted at the pawn shop. To getting exactly what we deserve, I replied. Linda's smile faltered slightly at my phrasing, but she recovered quickly. I've been thinking about what you said about complete honesty. About rebuilding our marriage on a foundation of trust, Linda said. She pulled a folder from her purse and laid it on the table between us. I want to show you that I'm serious about making things right, Linda said. Inside the folder were credit counseling documents, a payment plan for her debt, and what appeared to be a commitment to financial transparency. Linda had clearly spent considerable time creating the appearance of responsibility and remorse. This is impressive, I said to Linda, reviewing the papers. It looks like you've thought of everything. I have. Because losing you would be worse than any financial problem, Linda said. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to an intimate whisper. David, these past 3 weeks have shown me what really matters. Not money, not possessions, but the life we've built together. The irony was breathtaking. Linda was talking about the importance of non-material things while wearing jewelry she'd bought with money stolen from my family's possessions. Our appetizers arrived, and Linda continued her performance. She talked about her plans for paying back every penny, her gratitude for my forgiveness, and her excitement about renewing our vows. "I've been thinking about what I want to say during the ceremony," Linda said between bites of escargot. "About how you saved me from despair after my divorce, how you gave Jake and me a family when we had nowhere else to go." The narrative was compelling. Linda as the grateful rescued woman, me as the generous widower who'd opened his heart and home to strangers in need. It might even have been true initially. "What else have you been thinking about?" I asked Linda. Linda's expression grew more serious. "About Emma, and how I can rebuild my relationship with her. I know she's angry about the ring, and I understand why," she said. "What would you say to Emma if you had the chance?" I asked. "I'd tell her that I never meant to hurt her or dishonor her mother's memory, that the ring was never about money for me, but about desperation and poor judgment," Linda said. Her eyes filled with tears again. "I'd ask for her forgiveness and promise that nothing like this would ever happen again." The performance was Oscar-worthy. If I didn't know about the systematic theft, the hidden debt, the unemployment fraud, I might have believed she was genuinely remorseful. Our main courses arrived, and Linda continued weaving her story of redemption and renewed commitment. She talked about couples therapy, financial counseling, and her plans to return to school for a degree that would help her contribute more to our household income. "I want to be the wife you deserve," Linda said as we shared creme brulee for dessert. "The wife Margaret would have wanted you to find." That was the moment I decided Linda had earned everything that was about to happen to her. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small wrapped box, identical to the ones that had contained Margaret's engagement ring all those years ago. Linda's face lit up with excitement and surprise. "David, what is this?" Linda asked. "A gift." "Something to commemorate our new beginning," I replied. Linda unwrapped the box with trembling fingers, probably expecting jewelry that would symbolize my forgiveness and our renewed commitment. When she opened the lid, her expression shifted from anticipation to confusion. Inside the box was a key, a simple brass key with no identifying marks. "I don't understand," Linda said, holding the key up to the candlelight. "What does this unlock?" "Your future," I replied, taking a sip of wine. "Let me explain what that key represents." Linda set the key on the table between us, her smile becoming forced and uncertain. "That key opens a storage unit that contains everything you've stolen from my family over the past 3 years," I said, keeping my voice conversational, as if we were discussing dessert options. "Margaret's jewelry, the antique clock, the paintings, the silver tea service." The color drained from Linda's face, but I continued before she could speak. "You see, Linda, while you've been planning this touching renewal ceremony, I've been doing some planning of my own," I said. I pulled out my phone and showed her photographs of the storage unit's contents. "It took some effort, but I managed to recover almost everything you sold," I explained. Linda's mouth opened and closed without sound. Her hands began shaking visibly. The ring was trickier, obviously, since Cash for Gold had already broken it down for parts. But I found a jeweler who could recreate it exactly from the photographs Emma had taken. "Cost me $12,000, but some things are worth any price," I continued. Linda's carefully constructed performance was crumbling in real time. "David, I can explain everything. The storage unit, the key, I don't understand what you're saying," Linda stammered. "What I'm saying is that you've been caught, not just in the thefts you've already committed, but in the lie you've been living for the past 3 weeks, I said. I pulled out copies of the documents Emma and I had compiled. Bank statements, credit card records, insurance inventories, police reports. "Did you really think I wouldn't investigate after discovering Margaret's ring was gone? Did you think I wouldn't notice that half my family's heirlooms had disappeared while you were supposedly learning to love me?" I asked. Linda tried to reach for my hand, but I moved it away. "David, please let me explain. I never meant for any of this to happen," Linda pleaded. "Linda, you've been stealing from me systematically since the day you moved into my house. This wasn't desperation or poor judgment. This was a 3-year plan to liquidate my family's assets while maintaining the pretense of being a loving wife," I said. The other diners were beginning to notice our conversation, but I didn't care. Linda had earned this public humiliation. "The unemployment fraud was particularly clever," I continued. telling me you were working part-time at the dental office while actually collecting benefits, using that money plus credit card advances to maintain your lifestyle while stealing my possessions to pay off the debt. Linda's face had gone completely pale. Tears were streaming down her cheeks, but they looked different now, less like remorse and more like panic. "But here's what I find most impressive about your scheme," I said, leaning back in my chair. "You convinced me that you loved me while systematically stealing everything that represented my love for Margaret and Emma. You sold my mother's ring to buy your son a sports car. You sold Margaret's paintings to pay credit card bills. You converted 43 years of marriage into cash so you could maintain an illusion of financial stability," I continued. Linda tried to speak, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished. Because you see, Linda, while you were learning to steal from my family, I was learning some things too," I said. I pulled out the final document and placed it on the table. I learned that theft by conversion is a felony when the stolen property exceeds $5,000 in value. I learned that unemployment fraud carries penalties of up to 2 years in prison, I explained. Linda stared at the legal documents with growing horror. I learned that someone who's desperate enough to steal family heirlooms is probably desperate enough to forge signatures on financial documents, I said, showing her copies of bank withdrawal slips with her signature that didn't match her normal handwriting. The FBI takes bank fraud very seriously. Linda finally found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "David, what are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm going to do exactly what you did to me. I'm going to take away everything you think belongs to you," I said. I stood up and placed several $20 bills on the table to cover our meal. "The storage unit key is yours to keep. Consider it a going-away present," I said. Linda grabbed my arm as I prepared to leave. "David, please, we can work this out. I'll do anything to make this right," Linda pleaded. "Linda, you had 3 years to make things right. Instead, you spent 3 years making things worse," I replied. I gently removed her hand from my arm. "Your belongings are packed and waiting in the storage unit. The combination for the lock is your son Jake's birthday, since he was apparently worth more to you than my family's 43-year history," I told her. Linda's sobs were attracting attention from the entire restaurant now, but I no longer cared about appearances. "The divorce papers will be served tomorrow morning. Detective Martinez will contact you next week about the criminal charges," I said. I looked down at Linda one final time. "I hope Jake's car was worth it," I said. As I walked toward the exit, I heard Linda call my name, but I didn't turn around. Behind me, she was crying loudly enough that the maitre d' was approaching our table with concern. I stepped into the cool evening air and took the first deep breath I'd had in 3 weeks. Linda's education was complete, and Emma's inheritance was safe. The only question now was whether Linda had learned anything from the experience, or if she was already planning to steal from her next victim. I woke up the next morning in Emma's guest room to the sound of my phone buzzing relentlessly on the nightstand. 14 missed calls from Linda, 6 voicemails, and a stream of text messages that grew increasingly desperate as the night had progressed. The first voicemail was recorded at 11:47 p.m., just 3 hours after I'd left her sobbing in the restaurant. "David, please call me back. We need to talk about this." "I know you're angry, but we can work through it," Linda's voice said. By the fourth message, recorded at 2:03 a.m., her tone had shifted to barely controlled panic. "David, I went to the storage unit. I saw everything you recovered. How did you find all those pieces? How long have you been planning this?" Linda asked in the recording. The final voicemail, left at 6:15 a.m., was different. Linda's voice was flat, emotionless, as if she'd finally processed the full scope of her situation. "I know you're not going to forgive me. I know our marriage is over. But David, please don't destroy my entire life over this," Linda pleaded. Emma knocked on the guest room door as I was listening to the messages. "Dad, everything okay? Your phone's been going off all night," Emma said. I opened the door and handed her the phone. "Linda's having a difficult evening," I replied. Emma scrolled through the text messages, her expression shifting from concern to anger to something approaching pity. "Dad, she's falling apart. Some of these messages don't even make sense," Emma observed. She was right. The texts showed Linda's mental state deteriorating in real time as she realized the consequences of her theft were going to extend far beyond losing our marriage. "Look at this one," Emma said, showing me a message sent at 4 a.m. David, you don't understand what you're doing to Jake. He can't survive another scandal in this town. Everyone already talks about his father leaving us. Now they'll say his mother is a thief. I read the message twice, feeling an unexpected twinge of sympathy that I immediately suppressed. Linda had made her choices. Her son's social standing wasn't my responsibility. Dad, what exactly did you do yesterday? Beyond the storage unit reveal? Emma asked. I explained about the police reports, the unemployment fraud investigation, and the criminal charges Detective Martinez was preparing. Emma listened with growing concern. This is going to destroy her completely, Emma said when I finished. Not just financially, but socially. In a town this size, everyone will know within a week. Emma, she sold your grandmother's ring to buy her son a sports car while lying to me about working. She's been stealing from us for 3 years, I reminded her. Some people only learn through complete consequences. Emma nodded, but I could see the conflict in her eyes. My daughter had inherited Margaret's compassion along with her intelligence. At 9 a.m., I received a call from James Crawford. David, the divorce papers are being served this morning. I've also forwarded our evidence to the State Unemployment Office and the FBI Financial Crimes Unit, James said. How long before she faces charges? I asked. Unemployment fraud typically moves quickly, 6 weeks, maybe less. The federal charges will take longer, but with the documentation you provided, they're almost certain, James explained. He paused. David, are you prepared for what comes next? What do you mean? I asked. Linda's going to fight this. She's going to try to paint you as a vindictive older man who's punishing her for making one mistake. She'll claim elder abuse, emotional manipulation, anything that might create sympathy, James warned. I thought about Linda's performance last night, her tears and promises and carefully rehearsed remorse. She's already started that campaign, I said. Then you need to be prepared for it to get uglier. Desperate people do desperate things, and Linda's about to become very desperate indeed, James said. James was right. At 10:30 a.m., I received a call from Linda's newly hired attorney, Marcus Webb, the same lawyer who'd handled guardianship cases, apparently branching out into damage control for theft charges. Mr. Henderson, my client is devastated by your decision to end your marriage over what amounts to a financial misunderstanding, Webb said in his smoothest professional tone. A financial misunderstanding that involved stealing family heirlooms worth $28,000? I asked. Mr. Henderson, my client was under the impression that marital assets were available for family emergencies. She's willing to enter counseling to address any communication issues that led to this unfortunate situation, Webb said. The audacity was breathtaking. Webb was trying to reframe 3 years of systematic theft as a communication problem. Mr. Webb, your client forged my signature on bank withdrawal slips, committed unemployment fraud, and sold property that was specifically excluded from our marital estate. This isn't a misunderstanding, I replied. Sir, those are serious allegations that my client disputes. We believe this matter can be resolved through mediation rather than criminal prosecution, Webb said. His voice carried the practiced confidence of someone who'd convinced other victims to accept settlements rather than pursue justice. Mr. Webb, tell your client that criminal charges have already been filed. The time for mediation ended when she decided to steal from my family, I said. I hung up and immediately called Detective Martinez to report Webb's contact. Detective, Linda's attorney is already trying to pressure me into dropping charges, I told her. That's standard procedure for defense attorneys in theft cases, Detective Martinez replied. Don't let him intimidate you. We have solid evidence, and the prosecutor is confident about moving forward. That afternoon, Linda showed up at Emma's house. I watched from the guest room window as she sat in her car for 20 minutes, gathering courage or practicing her script. When she finally knocked, Emma answered the door with Mark standing behind her, arms crossed. Linda, what are you doing here? Emma asked, her voice coldly polite. Emma, I need to talk to you about your father, about what he's doing to our family, Linda said. Her voice carried the same desperate edge I'd heard in her voicemails. Our family? Linda, you're not part of our family anymore. You forfeited that when you sold my grandmother's ring, Emma replied. Linda's composure cracked. Emma, please. Your father is trying to have me arrested. He's going to destroy Jake's future over a mistake I'm willing to fix, Linda said. Emma stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind her, probably to prevent her children from hearing the conversation. Linda, you didn't make a mistake. You committed theft. Repeatedly, over 3 years, Emma said. I was desperate. I had debts I couldn't handle, and I panicked, Linda explained. So you decided to steal from my family instead of asking for help or being honest about your situation, Emma said. Her voice was firm but not cruel. "Linda, my father would have helped you with financial problems if you'd been honest. Instead, you chose to lie and steal." Linda began sobbing openly. "Emma, if your father presses these charges, I'll go to prison. Jake will lose his job when everyone finds out. We'll lose everything," Linda pleaded. "You should have thought about that before you sold my grandmother's ring," Emma replied. I watched Linda walk back to her car, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Part of me felt sorry for her, but a larger part remembered the empty jewelry box and the casual way she'd dismissed Margaret's memory. That evening, Detective Martinez called with an update. "Mr. Henderson, your wife's attorney contacted the prosecutor's office today. He's claiming you're using criminal charges to coerce a financial settlement in your divorce," Detective Martinez said. "What did the prosecutor say?" I asked. "That evidence doesn't care about marital disputes. The thefts happened, they're documented, and they're prosecutable regardless of your personal relationship with the defendant," Detective Martinez explained. Detective Martinez explained that Linda would be formally charged within the week. "The unemployment office is also pursuing their case independently. Your wife's in serious legal trouble that won't disappear even if you decided to forgive her," she said. Wednesday morning brought another development. Jake appeared at Emma's door at 7 a.m., still wearing the clothes he'd worn to work the day before. Emma called me to the living room where Jake sat on the couch looking like he'd aged 5 years overnight. "Mr. Henderson," Jake said, his voice hoarse with exhaustion, "my mom told me what happened, about the ring and the other stuff." I sat across from him, studying his face. Jake had always been polite to me, if somewhat distant, but today he looked genuinely shaken. "She said you're going to have her arrested." "That I'm going to lose my job when everyone finds out," Jake said. His hands were trembling. "Mr. Henderson, I swear I didn't know she stole anything to buy my car. I thought she'd saved the money." I believed him. Jake was many things: entitled, lazy, irresponsible, but he wasn't a criminal. He was just a kid whose mother had taught him that other people's assets were available for his use. "Jake, what exactly did your mother tell you about the money for your car?" I asked. "She said she'd been saving from her job." "That she'd gotten a bonus for working extra hours," Jake explained. He looked down at his hands. "I should have asked more questions. $4,000 was more than she'd ever had at one time." "Your car cost more than $4,000, I pointed out. Jake's face reddened. "I had some savings from my last job, about $3,000. Mom said she could cover the rest if I promised to pay her back," he said. The story was plausible. Linda had been careful to make Jake complicit in her theft without making him aware that it was theft. "Mr. Henderson, is there anything I can do to help fix this? I can sell the car, give the money back," Jake offered. I looked at this young man who'd been raised by a woman who viewed other people's property as emergency funding for her family's needs. "Jake, selling the car won't bring back your grandmother's ring or my grandfather's clock. The damage is done," I said. "But maybe it would show that we're trying to make things right," Jake said. Emma, who'd been listening quietly, spoke for the first time. "Jake, your mother stole from our family for 3 years. Not just the ring, but dozens of items that had belonged to my mother and grandmother," Emma said. Jake's face went pale. 3 years? She told me it was just the ring," he said. "Your mother is a thief who got caught," Emma said bluntly. "Selling your car might make you feel better, but it won't change the fact that she committed multiple felonies." Jake started crying then. The kind of helpless sobs that come when someone realizes their entire life has been built on lies they never questioned. "My mom's going to prison, isn't she? And everyone in town is going to know what she did," Jake said. I felt a stab of sympathy for this kid who was learning that his mother wasn't the struggling but honest woman she pretended to be. "Jake, your mother made choices that have consequences, adult consequences for adult crimes," I said. Jake nodded miserably. "Mr. Henderson, I know you probably hate us both now, but I want you to know that I respected you. I never wanted to take anything from your family," he said. "I don't hate you, Jake. But I can't help you either. You're going to have to figure out how to build a life that isn't funded by other people's stolen property," I replied. After Jake left, Emma and I sat in her kitchen while her boys ate breakfast and got ready for school. "Dad, I feel sorry for him," Emma said quietly. "He's going to pay for his mother's crimes for years." "Emma, Jake's 22 years old. He's old enough to understand that money doesn't appear magically when his mother needs it," I said. "But he's also young enough that this might teach him to make better choices than Linda did," Emma said. She poured herself another cup of coffee. What happens now? I thought about Linda facing criminal charges, social humiliation, and financial ruin. About Jake learning that his opportunities in life couldn't be purchased with stolen goods. About Emma finally understanding that Margaret's legacy was protected and honored, even if the original ring was gone forever. Now we wait for justice to do its work, I said to Emma, and we rebuild our family without people who think love means access to other people's assets. The phone rang as we were finishing breakfast. Emma answered and immediately handed it to me with a concerned expression. "Dad, it's Detective Martinez," Emma said. "Mr. Henderson, I'm calling to let you know that Linda Henderson was arrested this morning at her attorney's office. She's been charged with theft by conversion, unemployment fraud, and bank fraud," Detective Martinez said. I closed my eyes and felt something in my chest finally relax. "What happens next?" I asked. "Arraignment is scheduled for Friday. Bail will probably be set, but given the amount of money involved and the flight risk, it won't be low," Detective Martinez explained. She paused. "Mr. Henderson, I need to warn you that desperate people sometimes escalate. Keep your doors locked and your phone close." After hanging up, I looked at Emma, who'd been listening to my side of the conversation. "It's over," I said to Emma. "Linda's been arrested." Emma nodded, but her expression was thoughtful rather than celebratory. "Dad, are you sure this is what Mom would have wanted?" Emma asked. The question stopped me cold. Margaret had been the kindest person I'd ever known, someone who believed in forgiveness and second chances. "Emma, your mother would have wanted her ring to go to you, not to be sold by someone who viewed our family's history as a source of emergency cash," I said. "I know, but would she have wanted Linda to go to prison?" Emma asked. I thought about Margaret's funeral, when Linda had been genuinely supportive and helpful. When she'd seemed to understand how much I was grieving and how difficult it was to imagine life without the woman I'd loved for 43 years. "Your mother would have wanted Linda to tell the truth about her financial problems instead of solving them by stealing from us," I said finally. "Some lessons can only be learned through consequences." Emma squeezed my hand. "I love you, Dad, and I'm proud of you for protecting our family's legacy," Emma said. That afternoon, I drove back to my house to collect more of my belongings. Linda's car was in the driveway, which surprised me. I'd expected her to be with her attorney, preparing for Friday's arraignment. The front door was unlocked. Inside, I found Linda sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by the financial documents I'd confronted her with at the restaurant. Linda looked up when I entered, her face puffy from crying, but her expression strangely calm. "I figured you'd come back eventually," Linda said, "to get more of your things." I nodded, unsure whether this was going to be another performance or something more genuine. "David, I've been sitting here all night, looking at these papers, trying to understand how I let things get this bad," Linda said. Her voice was hoarse but steady. "I think I need to tell you something I should have told you 3 years ago." I remained standing, arms crossed. "After yesterday's performance, I wasn't inclined to trust anything," Linda said. "When I married you, I was already $23,000 in debt. Credit cards from when my first husband left, bills from Jake's medical issues when he was younger," Linda said. She stared down at her hands. "I thought marrying someone financially stable would solve my problems." The admission hit like a physical blow. "You married me for money?" I asked. "I married you because I was desperate and you were kind, and I convinced myself that I could learn to love you enough to justify using you," Linda said. She looked up at me with eyes that were red but clear. "But I did learn to love you, David. That part wasn't fake." "Just the part about respecting my family and honoring Margaret's memory," I said. Linda flinched as if I'd struck her. "I told myself that Margaret's things were just objects, that you were holding on to them out of grief, not because they had real meaning to Emma," Linda said. "You told yourself what you needed to believe to justify stealing them," I replied. "Yes. And I told myself that Jake deserved the same opportunities Emma had been given, even if I had to take them from your family," Linda said. Her voice broke. "I convinced myself that loving my son justified hurting your daughter." The honesty was brutal and late, but it felt real in a way her restaurant performance hadn't. "Linda, Emma lost her mother when she was 30 years old. She's been grieving for 5 years. Those heirlooms were her only tangible connection to Margaret," I said. "I know that now. I think I knew it then, but I chose to ignore it because acknowledging it would have meant admitting what I was doing was unforgivable," Linda replied. I sat down across from her, the same position we'd been in 3 nights earlier when I'd first confronted her about the ring, but the dynamic was completely different now. "What are you going to do?" I asked Linda. Linda pulled out a legal document and slid it across the table. "I'm pleading guilty to all charges, no trial, no plea bargain." "Full responsibility," she said. I read the document with surprise. "Your attorney is advising you to plead guilty?" I asked. "My attorney is advising me to fight everything, claim emotional abuse, argue that the stolen items were marital property," Linda said. Her mouth twisted into a bitter smile. "But I'm tired of lying." She pulled out another document. "I'm also signing a financial agreement giving you full recovery rights for everything I stole, plus damages," Linda said. The numbers were staggering. Linda was agreeing to a judgment that would follow her for the rest of her life. "This will bankrupt you," I said. "I'm already bankrupt. Morally, financially, emotionally," Linda replied. She stood up and walked to the window overlooking Margaret's garden. "David, I want you to know that living in this house, being part of your family, those were the happiest 3 years of my life. Even though I was stealing from you the entire time, being married to you made me feel like I could be someone better than who I actually am," Linda said. The words hung between us, heavy with regret and brutal self-awareness. "Linda, why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because I want you to understand that losing you isn't my punishment. Losing you is my consequence," Linda said. She turned back to face me. "The punishment is knowing that I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me and to Jake." I looked at this woman who'd shared my bed for 3 years, who'd sat across from me at Margaret's kitchen table, who'd pretended to care about preserving my late wife's memory while systematically destroying it. "What's going to happen to Jake?" I asked. Linda's composure finally broke. "He'll have to leave town, start over somewhere else where people don't know his mother is a thief. He'll lose his job, his friends, his chance to build a life here," Linda said. "That's not my fault, Linda," I said. "No, it's mine. Just like everything else," Linda replied. She picked up her purse and walked toward the front door. "I'll have the rest of my things out by tomorrow. Jake's already moved back to his father's place in Kansas City." Linda paused at the door. "David, the car Jake bought with the money, it's a 2007 Camaro, red with black racing stripes. If you want it, it's yours. Consider it a down payment on what I owe your family," she said. After Linda left, I walked through the house that felt like mine again for the first time in 3 years. Margaret's photographs were still on the mantel, her books still on the shelves, but the space no longer felt contaminated by someone who viewed them as obstacles to her financial goals. I called Emma to update her on Linda's decision to plead guilty. "Dad, I'm glad she's taking responsibility, but I feel sorry for Jake. He's paying for his mother's crimes," Emma said. "Emma, Jake spent 3 years living in my house while his mother stole from us to maintain his lifestyle. He benefited from her crimes, even if he didn't know they were crimes," I replied. Emma was quiet for a moment. "You're right, but it's still sad to see a family destroy itself over money," she said. "It's not about money, sweetheart, it's about respect. Linda never respected our family or Margaret's memory. She saw us as resources to be exploited, not people to be loved," I explained. That evening, I sat in Margaret's garden as the sun set behind the roses she'd planted 20 years earlier. The same roses that had bloomed through her illness, through my grief, through my misguided attempt to build a new family with someone who didn't understand what family meant. Tomorrow, Linda would be arraigned and formally charged with felonies that would follow her for the rest of her life. Jake would start over in a new city, hopefully learning to build a life based on his own efforts rather than his mother's theft. And Emma would receive Margaret's recreated ring, knowing that her father had fought to preserve their family's legacy even when it cost him a marriage. The consequences were complete, but they felt just. Some lessons can only be learned through loss, and some people only respect boundaries when crossing them results in permanent consequences. Linda had learned both lessons, finally and completely. 2 years after Linda's sentencing, I received a letter that made Margaret's legacy complete. The letter was from Emma. She was writing to thank me for the recreated engagement ring I'd given her on her 36th birthday. The ring now sat in a safety deposit box, waiting for the day one of her twin boys might want to propose to someone special. "Your fight to recover Mom's stolen heirlooms showed my children something important," Emma wrote. "That family legacy is worth protecting, even when protection requires difficult decisions about people we thought we loved." I was sitting on the front porch reading her letter when a familiar truck pulled into my driveway. It was Robert Chen, a neighbor who'd known Margaret and me for 20 years. Robert had watched Linda's trial proceedings with the quiet interest of someone who understood how financial desperation could corrupt family relationships. "David," Robert said, walking across the yard with the measured pace of someone who'd spent his retirement years learning to notice the details he'd missed during his working life. "I heard about Jake's new job in Denver. Sounds like he's finally making something of himself." I settled into the chair beside Margaret's favorite porch swing. The same swing where she'd spent summer evenings reading books about gardening and family history, never knowing that someone would someday try to sell that history for cash. "Jake's doing well," I confirmed to Robert. "Linda says he's working construction, learning skills that will give him a legitimate career." Robert nodded with approval. "That's what young men need. Work that teaches them the value of earning what they have instead of expecting it to be provided," he said. We sat quietly for a while, watching the roses Margaret had planted bloom in their third season since Linda's arrest, young flowers learning to thrive in soil that had been cleared of parasites. Robert asked me how I felt about Linda's early release for good behavior. She'd served 18 months of her 3-year sentence before being transferred to a halfway house program. I told him it felt appropriate. Linda had faced consequences that changed her permanently, which was more important than the specific duration of her punishment. "Besides, I'm more interested in what she learned than how long she spent learning it," I said to Robert. I pointed to a letter I'd received from Linda the previous week. "She's working as a financial counselor now, helping other people avoid the debt problems that led to her crimes." Robert read Linda's letter with interest. In it, she explained how prison had forced her to confront the spending addiction and entitlement mentality that had driven her to steal from my family. "I've learned that desperation doesn't justify betrayal," Linda had written. "That people who offer love and support deserve honesty, not manipulation designed to gain access to their assets. Most importantly, I've learned that Jake's success needs to be built on his own efforts, not funded by other people's stolen possessions," Linda's letter continued. Robert handed the letter back to me. "Sounds like prison was educational for her," he said. "Some people only learn through complete consequences." "Linda was one of those people," I replied. 3 months later, Emma brought her children for their regular weekend visit. These visits had become treasured events where my grandsons could experience the rural life Margaret and I had loved while learning about their family history. "Dad," Emma said as we watched her boys explore the garden where Margaret had spent countless hours nurturing plants that would outlive her, "I've been thinking about something, about the choice you made to prosecute Linda instead of just divorcing her quietly." "What conclusions have you reached?" I asked Emma. "I think you saved Jake from learning that love means enabling other people's irresponsible behavior. You showed him that real family relationships require honesty and respect, not just financial support," Emma said. Emma was right. Jake had learned that his opportunities needed to be earned rather than stolen, that building a life on other people's assets was ultimately unsustainable. "More importantly," Emma continued, "you showed my children that family legacy is worth fighting for, that some things matter more than keeping peace with people who don't respect what previous generations built." My grandson Michael, now 10 years old, had become fascinated with the stories about his grandmother Margaret. He'd learned about the ring, the garden, and the principles she'd tried to instill in our family. "Grandpa," Michael said one Saturday while we were working in Margaret's vegetable garden, "Mom says Great-Grandma's ring is safe now because you fought to protect it from someone who wanted to sell it." I explained to Michael that protecting family legacy sometimes requires difficult decisions about people who claim to love you but treat your family's history as disposable. "I'm glad you protected Great-Grandma's ring from the bad lady," Michael said, with the moral clarity that children possess before life teaches them to compromise their principles for social harmony. Michael was right. Linda hadn't been evil, but she'd been destructive to our family's legacy and values. "Michael, your great-grandmother believed that love means protecting what matters most, even when protection requires courage and sacrifice," I said to my grandson. 4 years after Linda's conviction, I received an unexpected visitor. A woman in her 30s knocked on my door on a Tuesday morning, professional appearance but nervous energy. "Mr. Henderson? My name is Jennifer Walsh. I'm Linda's younger sister." "We haven't met, but I wanted to thank you for something," Jennifer said. Jennifer explained that Linda's arrest and conviction had forced their entire family to confront patterns of financial irresponsibility and entitlement that had been ignored for years. Linda's case became a wake-up call for our whole family, Jennifer said. We realized that we'd been enabling her spending addiction and Jake's entitlement for years, telling ourselves we were being supportive when we were actually preventing them from learning to be self-sufficient. Jennifer had brought a folder containing documentation of Linda's progress in the halfway house program. Steady employment, debt counseling, and most importantly, a relationship with Jake based on honesty rather than financial manipulation. Mr. Henderson, Linda destroying your marriage saved her relationship with her son. Prison forced her to learn how to love Jake without stealing from other people to provide for him, Jennifer explained. 6 months later, Emma called with news that completed Linda's transformation. Dad, I got a letter from Linda. She wanted me to know that she's fully employed now and has been making payments toward the restitution judgment, Emma said. Emma read portions of Linda's letter aloud. I know I can never undo the damage I caused to your family's legacy, but I want you to know that losing everything taught me to value what I actually had instead of coveting what belonged to other people, Linda had written. Linda had also written about Jake's success in Denver, where he'd built a career based on his own skills rather than assets stolen from his stepfather's family. She sounds different, Emma observed, like someone who finally understands the difference between love and financial manipulation. The letter included something else that surprised me. Linda had researched the history of Margaret's engagement ring and written a detailed account of its significance to our family. She'd learned about my mother's life during the Depression, about Margaret's pride in wearing a ring that represented 4 generations of committed marriages, about Emma's childhood dreams of someday inheriting something that connected her to the women who'd shaped our family's values. Linda had finally understood what she'd stolen from us, and the knowledge had changed her permanently. That autumn, I sat on Margaret's porch swing reading a book about family financial planning. Emma had asked me to review it as part of her preparation for teaching her boys about money management and family responsibility. The book emphasized the importance of honest communication about financial challenges rather than solutions that involve taking from family members without their knowledge or consent. I thought about Linda, now working as a debt counselor, helping other people avoid the mistakes that had destroyed our marriage and nearly destroyed her relationship with Jake. Some people called my prosecution of Linda vindictive. They said I should have shown mercy to a woman who'd made mistakes out of desperation rather than malice. But mercy without consequences doesn't teach anyone anything. Linda had learned to steal gradually, testing my boundaries and my trust until she felt comfortable taking whatever she needed to solve her financial problems. Only complete consequences had been powerful enough to break that pattern and force her to develop legitimate solutions to legitimate problems. Margaret would have been proud that her engagement ring's legacy had taught multiple people important lessons about family, respect, and the difference between love and financial manipulation. The ring itself was safe now, protected in Emma's safety deposit box along with other family heirlooms that would someday be passed to her children. But more importantly, the principles the ring represented were safe too. The understanding that family legacy requires protection from people who would trade history for convenience. Linda had learned that betraying family trust carries consequences that extend far beyond legal penalties. Jake had learned that success requires personal effort rather than assets stolen from other people. And Emma had learned that some things are worth fighting for, even when fighting means losing people you thought you loved. The education had been expensive for everyone involved, but worth every dollar Linda spent learning it. As autumn turned to winter, I received one final letter from Linda. She was writing to inform me that she'd completed her restitution payments ahead of schedule and wanted to formally apologize for the pain she'd caused our family. I destroyed your marriage to save my son from consequences he'd earned through years of entitlement, Linda wrote. I stole your family's legacy to maintain a lifestyle I couldn't afford through honest work. Most importantly, I betrayed your trust during the years when you were still grieving Margaret and learning to love again. That betrayal was unforgivable, and I'm grateful you didn't forgive it, Linda's letter continued. The consequences you imposed taught both Jake and me lessons we couldn't have learned any other way. That family love means honesty and respect, not access to other people's assets when your own choices create financial problems, she wrote. I folded Linda's letter and placed it in the same box where I kept Margaret's photographs and Emma's childhood drawings. Evidence that our family had survived attempted theft and emerged stronger. Some lessons can only be learned through loss. Some education can only be provided by people who refuse to enable destructive behavior, even when enabling would be easier than confronting uncomfortable truths. Linda had provided that education at a cost of her marriage, her freedom, and her son's respect, and she'd learned that some people are too principled to be stolen from, no matter how desperate the thief or how convincing their justifications. It was an expensive lesson, but worth every year she'd spent learning it. I hope this story touched you, especially those protecting family legacy from people who see inheritance as emergency funding rather than sacred trust that connects generations. If this story moved you, please support our channel with a like and subscribe for more stories about family betrayal, intelligent justice, and the courage to protect what matters most from those who would exploit our love. Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts, or let us know where you're listening from around the world. These stories about family, legacy, and protecting inheritance from manipulation connect people across all cultures and communities. Thank you for joining this journey through marital deception, family theft, and the wisdom that comes from refusing to enable destructive behavior, even when confrontation requires sacrificing relationships we thought we valued. Until next time, remember, the most valuable inheritance isn't money or property, but the principles guiding how we treat others and protect what matters most from those who would exploit our trust and love.